on public property in arenas, in areas surrounding the arena. Max, I want to start with you here. Will Kane also back with us. Will, good to have you. What is your reaction to this?
Well, I defend their right, as protected by the First Amendment, to make that statement. You know, the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, the document that the South fought not to be bound by. I mean, the North American slave trade, I also have free right protection, free speech protection, and I'll exercise that right now. The North American slave trade was an unprecedented crime against humanity. The Civil War was about slavery. The Confederate battle flag represents the fight for slavery. So people who are very offended by the kidnapping, torture, and murder of millions are going to be very offended by this. I am one of those people. So I would ask those who are raising that flag, what kind of person are you?
Well, I can't answer that specifically, Max, because I'm not someone who raises that flag, nor am I someone who wears that flag on any kind of T-shirt or anything like that. But I'll ask some questions back to you and Stephen A. First of all, let me start with this. I completely understand any African-American, or for that matter, any human being like Max, for example, that says that's exactly and only what they see in the Confederate flag, a symbolism of enslavement, a symbolism of oppression, and there's nothing more to that flag than that specific symbol. I understand that point of view. I sympathize with that point of view. And it's one that I personally want to be sensitive toward. That's why I don't raise it. That's why I don't wear the flag. I don't want to send any kind of message like that. I also recognize this, that there are people who do, Max, raise that flag to this day, wear that paraphernalia to this day for those exact reasons, perhaps pining for the days of that evil institution. But here's the question I would ask you and Stephen A. Is that truly all that symbol stands for today? Is it limited to that? When a girl wears that on a bikini at spring break in Alabama, is that the message she's sending? Is that what she's trying to say? That she's pining for the days of slavery? When the General Lee put it on its car during the Dukes of Hazzard, was that the message that it was advocating for? We just wish for the days? I mean, I'm going to let you guys both answer, but I think you're probably going to agree with me. No. It does stand for something else. It does stand for regional identity, regional pride. The South does maintain pride in its geographic identity, for its culture. Now, I'm from Texas. We have a huge amount of pride in our culture, our history, our identity. We raise that Texas flag as much as possible to send that message out. The South is similar. And there are those who want that flag to retain that meaning, that regional pride, who really do fly that flag without all the baggage attached to it. Whether they intend to or not, they are not subscribing to that. And all I would say is this, when you see that, I think that's the reason, Max, Stephen A., this fight drags out. If it were just about a symbol of slavery, we wouldn't keep having this fight. But it means more to more people. And I don't know what these guys, by the way, this small group of protesters in South Carolina, I don't know specifically what they're searching for, what message they're trying to send. But there are those who simply want it to continue to mean regional pride, regional identity.
Reading from an article in CNN last year, I remember they said something about how the Confederate flag, it's a racist symbol that represents a war to uphold slavery, as Max Kellerman just alluded to. Last time I checked, Max Kellerman feels that way. You recognize that in the eyes of the African-American community, that's exactly how it's viewed.
Absolutely.
Me being a black man, I'm here to tell you that's how it's viewed. I'll ask a rhetorical question. Why is that not enough? Jewish folks remind us constantly about what their plight was through Nazi Germany and beyond. And as a result, we don't challenge what they say. We respect the fact that as Jews, this is what they endured. It's what they highlighted. It's what they have disseminated to the masses. We respect it and we fall back. How come the same decency? How come the same, whatever word we want to use, isn't accorded to the African-American community? Right. I am here to tell you right now that there are African-Americans throughout this nation that would tell you that the Confederate flag, to them, is the equivalent of an American swastika. That's what they would say. That's what they would say, black folks, because we're talking slavery. We're talking people being maimed. We're talking people being tortured.
Slavery was a Holocaust. Slavery was a Holocaust.
That's
it was
right.
a Holocaust.
That's right. I appreciate that. So stay with me. Stay with me. Right. All I'm saying is that I can respect the fact that that's not what it is to a white person from the South, because you're talking about holding on to quote-unquote Southern pride and the like.
So just to be clear, in answering my question, you're saying you do see that there are some who would adopt that flag free of all of those symbols you just said you see in it.
Yes, but what I'm saying to you is that just like we could sit back, we have a mosaic that is the United States of America. We've got Jewish folks, we've got Catholics, we've got Christians, we've got Muslims, we've got everybody up in here, right? When it comes to the Holocaust, when it comes to Jewish folks and what they feel and what they have chronicled, their people have had to endure. What do? We fall back. So what I'm saying is, let's be consistent. In the United States of America, if we're going to do it for one, do it for somebody else as well. There is no disputing slavery. There is no disputing what went on. There is no disputing the insidious, repugnant, just ungodly acts that have taken place in this nation's history. It's well chronicled. So if that is not in dispute, and black folks are saying, hey, this is what it is, then that should be all that's required. Because remember, when the folks in South Carolina was murdered by Dylan Roof and what have you, they felt the need to take down a Confederate flag then because they recognized they had to stomach the fact that it was undeniable what it represented.
Okay, I want to answer your question. Sure. Why is that not enough? But before I do, Max, please, would you mind answering my question as well? Do you see it as possible for some people to adopt that flag free of all the messages and baggage that you and African Americans and even I see in it?
I would say that if you want to say, is that a statement of fact that some people do that and at least consciously would tell you, they pass a lie detector test telling you, no, it's about regional pride, I would say some of those people exist.
Yes.
My answer to that would be, once that Confederate battle flag, which was used as a symbol in the fight for slavery during the Civil War, decent people who think this through even a little bit have forfeited the use of that symbol as a symbol of regional pride.
Okay.
That's straightforward and simple.
Well, it is to you, Max. In all due respect, you grew up in New York City, and it's not hard for you to assign only one specific meaning to it. But there are people who grew up in Alabama, in Georgia, in Florida, who you just acknowledged can see something very different in that flag. Now, to answer your question, Stephen A., let's acknowledge the fact that to African Americans, it means one very specific thing, something that I can acknowledge, something that I alter my behavior. I would not do this because I acknowledge that it means that very specific things to African Americans. And your question is, why is that not enough? The answer, I think, has to be this. That over the last half century, the Confederate flag has not only meant that. You and Max have both admitted that to me just now. The swastika, the Nazi flag, has very little meaning to anyone beyond that abhorrent time in history.
Okay.
But I think we have all acknowledged that this Confederate flag has a meaning beyond a similarly horrendous moment in history.
What is it? What is the meaning?
It's regional pride. It's regional identity. And I could play psychotherapist and try to suggest why. I think the South, I think this is not stretching. The South has some level of insecurity towards the way the North has viewed it. It's viewed as dumb. It's viewed as backwards. That makes people view themselves
the Confederate
more
flag really helps there.
Hold on, Max.
They attach themselves to things like geographic pride and symbols, and not always wrongly. And then finally, when they have this symbol that they feel like honors who they are, and they're told, no, 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 that's evil, there will be a fight
I want to address that. I want to address
that
specifically. No, it's the insistence that that evil is not enough to ignore anything else. In other words, that the idea of the institution of slavery and the vicious and bloody fight they put up for it does not then forfeit any pride they may have in anything else. In other words,
to be clear, I have to set this record straight. I feel like we're having almost two different conversations here at times.
Yeah, we are.
You guys are having a debate with me, but you did this too. Listen, about whether or not slavery was a mark on our history. No one debates the nature of slavery and the evil that it represents.
I'm not saying that.
But the point is, the debate
it's not the defining
is
issue
over the symbol. The
Right.
debate
So
is
then
over
it
the
becomes
flag and whether that's all that the flag means.
That is what we're debating, because that becomes the defining issue. And if that didn't become the defining issue for somebody, then I have to question their intelligence or their character.
That's fine, and you're not wrong. We don't even have to go there. You're not wrong. But let me get back to you. Because, again, you're talking about what the Confederate flag means to those folks. Again, we can debate that because some folks, like you said, they're not thinking about African Americans. They're not thinking about what the Civil War represented. They're not thinking about the history of the Confederate flag from somebody else's vantage point, just their own. And I totally concede that. I totally concede that there are some people, and Max is saying that they're misinformed or whatever he wants to say, and I get all of that. What I'm saying to you is this. Then how come the same doesn't apply to the Jewish community? Because let me tell you something. You go down south, you see folks everywhere, highly sensitive. I would say to you that because the African-American community has historically been disenfranchised and disempowered, as a result, because you don't have to worry about the fallout, the ramifications that emanate from ignoring black history, you can then exercise that kind of thinking for those that are supportive of using the Confederate flag, because they would never do that to the Jewish community.
We're going to take
That's
a break,
the point that I'm making.
and we're going to come back and wrap this up in just
Sure.
a moment and get into some other subjects.